Morning, Chairman. We're now live.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning and welcome to this online meeting of the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Nigel Pepper and I'm the Chairman of this committee. This is a formal public meeting and the audio feed of this meeting is being broadcast via the County Council's website. I would like to welcome the members of the press and public who are listening to this online. I'd also like to welcome Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabularies and Fire and Rescue Service Liaison Lead, James Dorrell, who is attending our meeting today as an observer. Before we begin, I'd like to confirm who is present. Nick Harrison, Democratic Services Officer, will ask members to indicate their presence after their name is called. When invited to speak, you should unmute your microphones and switch on your video. When you are not participating in the meeting, please make sure you have muted your microphone and switched off your video. So, Nick, over to you at this stage.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Pepper.
Present.
Councillor Stokes.
Present.
Councillor Aaron.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Muscook.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Ashley Morris. Councillor Oxby.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Turner. Councillor Linda Wootton. Councillor Ray. Sorry.
Councillor Linda Wootton has given her apologies for this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ray Wootton.
Present.
That's all. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Just before we move on, has anyone not had their name called who is attending today? Please speak now if so. Okay, thank you. Just a little more housekeeping before we begin. I'd like to ask members of the committee and other participants to type "speak" in the chat when you wish to ask a question or make a contribution. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman, Councillor Stokes. Also, just a reminder, please turn off your microphone when not participating in the meeting. Can I also ask that members who are intending to leave the meeting indicate using the chat function? Officers do not need to do so. We'll now move on to the formal agenda. So, agenda item 1, apologies for absence and replacement members. Back to you then, Nick.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got apologies from Councillor Mrs. Christine Lawton, Councillor Barry Young.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 then, declarations of members' interests. Do members have any interest to declare? If so, please start speak in the meeting chat now. Councillor Cook wishing to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'll be leaving the meeting for agenda item 5, and I'd be really grateful if officers could let me know when I may rejoin the meeting by email. Once this item has been discussed. It's because although I've declared a pecuniary interest for working for LPFT, I currently work on projects that are funded by Lincolnshire County Council but managed by LPFT. So therefore I will not be taking part in any discussions involving this year's budget. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cook, for that, and officers will keep an eye open for when we've resumed after that then. Thank you. Councillor Stokes, have we any others wishing to declare an interest?
No, there are no further comments.
Okay, thank you then. Item 3 then, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of December 2020. This item is to confirm the minutes of our previous meeting held on the 8th of December as a correct record. I'll just go through the pages for accuracy. So starting at page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and finally page 11. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for those, please?
Councillor Runnoxby here, Chairman. I can pose those as I've read them thoroughly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oxby. We need a seconder.
Yeah, happy to second, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wharton. We'll now vote on the minutes. You're voting on whether you agree that the minutes are a correct record. Nick will call out the name of each member present in alphabetical order, and you're asked to state for, against, or abstain. Over to you again, Nick.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Aaron.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cook.
Abstain. I was absent, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs. Ashley Morris. Councillor Oxby.
For.
Councillor Pepper.
For.
Councillor Stokes.
For.
Councillor Ray Wootton.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous of those present, Chairman.
Thank you, Nick. Item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers. On behalf of Councillor Young, who's not with us today, I'd just like to announce that a new Chief Constable was appointed in December by the name of Chris Howard, spelled Haward. Chris was for the latter part of his time, was part of the East Midlands Special Operations Unit, to which Lincolnshire is part of. He's well qualified, well respected, and the ideal person to lead Lincolnshire Police Force. Another announcement I have is that I'll be taking item 6 on the East Coast Inundation Plan before item 5 today, as Fire and Rescue need to leave the meeting early due to their service engagements, which have started this week. Are there any other announcements from any other executive members and officers?
Chair, Mark Baxter here. If I'd like to make an announcement as well, please, Chair. I'm sure it's been also circulated by Councillor Nick Worth, but I just wanted to put on record and for the minutes that we will be having Assistant Chief Fire Officer Ryan Stacey, who will be starting with us on the 1st of February. Now, this is following a robust recruitment process that we completed in December that involved both external and internal candidates, and also involved a selection process that involved of our employees within the organisation to help choose our next Assistant Chief Officer. So I'm really pleased to announce that Ryan will be starting with us on the 1st of February. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for that. Just before I move on, is there any other announcements from Chief Officers, executive members, executive support members? Just give it a second. Okay, nothing coming through. So we'll now go on to item 6 then, as discussed, the East Coast Inundation Plan. At its meeting on the 6th of October 2020, the executive requested that our committee looked at a coastal inundation. After the decision by East Lindsey District Council to extend the caravan season into the winter season. This item sets out the East Coast Inundation Plan in response to that request, and this will be presented by Mark Baxter, Chief Fire Officer. If you'd like to speak on this item, please speak into the chat. We will take questions at the end of the report. So back to you then, Mark.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome everyone to this report on the East Coast Inundation Plan. I'll just give you a small bit of background in regards to the risk that we have for East Coast inundation with the Lincolnshire. Now, this is linked into our community risk profile that is also, which is mitigated by our integrated risk management plan, which we presented at the back end of last year. As you all know, flooding and severe weather is one of our highest risks within the county. And this is the reason why it's so high on our community risk profile, and when we've got quite a lot of significant resources and capabilities to ensure that we've got the best possible response for the people of Lincolnshire. So in regards to our actual response, in regards to our assets, all of our firefighters are trained into what called a technical response, which is a level D, which enables every one of our operational firefighters to be able to wade in water, in still water, to be able to reach people, to enable them to get evacuated out of homes and other areas. And they're also provided with the appropriate PPE and equipment to enable them to do that. We also have a more enhanced capabilities, which we have dedicated specialist teams, which use the resources of our 11 boats, which are powered and non-powered. And we also have 10 rescue rafts, which can be used to pull or to be waded into low-level flooded water to enable people to get them out of the risk area into an area of safety. Our enhanced rescue capabilities have all the required PPE, which is of a national standard, and we have enhanced training that we go out of county to Wales on an annual basis to ensure that everybody's up to speed with the latest techniques, particularly when we're operating in fast flowing water with our powered boats. To support our crews, we also have dedicated specialist tactical advisors within the service, and again they're trained to a national standard, and they're also helped within the National Resilience Mutual Aid, so they can also be deployed across the country to support areas of flooding in the country, but also we can rely on similar officers to come into Lincolnshire, which we have done on numerous occasions, and most notably in the recent Waynflete floodings to assist us on our efforts. Within National Resilience Mutual Aid, we also have our high volume pumps, which we receive grant funding from DEFRA that provide us with those, and also the DEFRA also provides us with funding for our specialist boat teams. Now, the DEFRA concept of operations states the specific standards that's required for those teams, and that is probably where the most challenge is for us at this moment in time. The funding that we have from DEFRA was set up approximately about 6 or 7 years ago, and that enabled us to put the response together. And this was in line with a bid that we put together with a multi-agency bid and with our emergency planning team. And that enabled us to get all the teams and the equipment over a 5-year period. When the 5-year period became extinct was about 18 months ago, DEFRA now gives us a grant funding. But the grant funding is really now based on the financial gap between us having our own risk assessment, our own assets in place to deal with a local risk, and the gap to enables us to have those assets available on nationally within the National Resilience platform. So where that means with us at the moment, there's potentially funding that we are going to have to review to see what the amount of support we can give to National Resilience, because the concept of operation standard has changed in the last 6 months, which means there's an even more enhanced training, which does have a new financial burden upon us. We don't see this as being a risk to us locally at this moment in time, particularly for the next 24 to 48 months, but we do recognise it may reduce our commitment to put forward on national resilience assets, but that is something that we're continually working with our colleagues within National Resilience to see how we can provide that support. But in no way, councillors, will this mean that we get any lack of support within National Resilience. So if we do still require additional resources from National Resilience, then they will provide them in the way that they always have. But I think it was just worth highlighting how the changing landscape of the concept of operations for specialist boat teams is changing, and so we're having to review our financial model to meet that. Going on with the rest of our other flood capabilities, clearly all our fire appliances have pumping capabilities. We've also procured specialist flood mounted pumps. That also comes with 4x4 capabilities, and that was being in conjunction with the lead local flood authority. We have 2 already in service, and we're expecting another 2 to be arriving by the end of March. So in the next 2 months, we'll have 4 of these dedicated capabilities. they're really excellent pieces of kit, because what they really mean is where we would normally have, I would suggest, probably 3 or 4 pumping appliances of our personnel being committed to an incident. With these pumps, we can put them in place, put them in situ with limited amount of people, maybe 2 or 3. We can leave them to carry out the same activity, which then means we can release our appliances, then they can be then located to more higher risk areas. So it's a really, really valuable use of assets there. We also have the low-level submersible pumps on all of our appliances, and they're really absolutely excellent for when we've got flooded homes and flooded basements, etc., where we can start getting movement of water out of people's homes to ensure that we can do the best we can in those really difficult circumstances. So in regards to the East Coast Inundation Plan, which is really the plan that we review on an annual basis, and it links into the LRF inundation plan, and this really identifies what our roles, our activities, how we will plan for, how we will respond, and how we will recover from wide-scale East Coast inundation. Clearly, we're absolutely integrally and heavily linked into the Local Resilience Forum, and we play a key role both at the Strategic Coordinating Group, Tactical Coordinating Group, and within the multi-agency intelligence cells and response cells, which are all the main areas in regards to how we plan and respond to the flooding. As the plan identifies there, it does cover the phases of this type of event. It really identifies the command and control elements that need to be put in place. It really identifies the multi-agency coordination response, and the areas which are getting into more the tactical elements are the areas of focus, such as the sectors and also the strategic holding areas and the forward command points. So really that's given us a really early heads up. If we are getting flooded areas, then we know exactly where we need to start putting our resources and putting in some of our command teams to ensure that we've got the best position for it. If it's okay, I'll pause. I just noticed there's a couple of people that want to ask some questions. Is it okay to ask them there, or did you want to wait till the end, Chair?
Yeah, thank you for the pause, Mark. Just to say that at one point you froze for a few seconds, so please excuse members if they ask you something that you've already answered. Certainly froze on my device, and I guess that's the same for everyone else's device. Can I just ask Councillor Clark and Councillor Corey if those questions can wait until the end, or do they feel that need to be answered at this point?
I can wait, Chairman.
Councillor Corey's indicated that she's happy to wait, Chairman.
Okay, just coming through. Yeah. Okay, so if you resume then, Mark, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So our East Coast Inundation Plan for fire is owned by our East Divisional Divisional Commander, and their role is to ensure the maintenance and the exercising is well practiced, to ensure that all of our staff within LFR have a continual update and are cited on what their roles are in regards to East Coast inundation. In March 2019, the service exercise focused on the inundation event, and this was a multiple site exercise that covered many forward control points. We did that in a live exercise as well as we did it on a tabletop. And we also established links with many of the caravan sites and exercised them at those locations as well. Clearly, as we mentioned about the Waynflete Flooding, which was our most recent significant event, due to this, we had a really significant debrief and got an awful lot of multi-agency learning from that event. The three main areas where we took on board for Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue was a need to ensure that we had closer liaison with partners for training and exercising, ensure that we had awareness to the areas of risk, followed a mutual risk visit, which was conducted by the Environmental Agency. Participants included representatives from all the relevant LRF members, and ensure that our greater understanding from our officer cadre of the logistical requirements when dealing with large and prolonged flooding. So to support these learning outcomes, we did ensure we developed our response type for these incidents, our organisational development team, with the support of the National Resilience Assurance Team. Now, that team is a national team that really coordinate the national response to not just flooding incidents, but large multi-agency protracted events. But they do have absolute dedicated specialist officers that have come in to service, and they've given us training and they've given us updates to ensure that we are as up to speed with the latest developments on how to deal with wide-scale flooding. In regards to the partnership arrangements, it is important that clearly that we work closely with all our multi-agency response and coordinating that through the LRF. As it said, it was always going to be likely that this would be a major incident and a state of emergency will be declared, which automatically sets up the LRF structure. Our emergency planning team is absolutely integral in pulling that together, not just supporting the plans and ensuring that they are exercised, but also offering the secretariat role for the local resilience forum. Following the update received this year through the local resilience forum, it was indicated that East Lindes District Council had applied to extend the caravan season, which meant that we would have potentially residents in situ all year round, and particularly in seasons where we see traditionally severe weather and flooding. Now, what we've done, we've been working closely through the LRF with ELDC to ensure that we are going to be planning for such an event. However, due to the impact of the COVID-19, this extension has been delayed until next year. So therefore, the extension for residents isn't within this current winter period, which is our current traditional flooding season. It's also given us the opportunity to work even closer to review and expand our plans for specifically this scenario. Early discussions have identified a number of areas within the existing plans where the additional risk for the caravan site will pose. And as I said, this further work is going to continuing. This is going to be managed through, we've got a multi-agency exercise, which I'm going to touch on in a little bit later, but I have got confirmed, which isn't in the paper because I've only had this confirmed since the paper was being released, but that will be being exercised on the 10th of February. And that will be involving fire and rescue, emergency planning, environmental agency, police, and invites will be going out to districts and councillors as well. So in regards to that exercise, there's an exercise aim, which is a list through on page 23. If I'm honest, Chair, I'm probably not going to go through the extensive list of the aims and objectives. I think they're for everybody's reference to identify, but I think it's really to reinforce the point. This is an opportunity for us to exercise our East Coast Inundation Plan, but also we'll be exercising the specific issues as if we've got multiple residents in situ on caravan sites during a winter period as well. So we can start to really get down to the issues of how we need to respond to that in that event. So really, in conclusion, Chair and councillors, this was really an opportunity for me to give an overview of the long-standing and, if I can almost say, the traditional response that we've had in Lincolnshire from fire and rescue. And when I say traditional, I mean that in the fact that we've been doing this for quite a number of years now. I think I'm proud to say, actually, we're quite well exercised and we have responded extremely effectively to wide-scale flooding in all events over the last 5 to 10 years. And I think the investment that we've had in regards to our capabilities, in regards to our training, in regards to our PPE, I think has absolutely been first class. And going around the country, as I do, speaking to my colleagues, we are often the envy of a lot of services in regards to the kit and equipment and the training we have. So I do believe we're very well placed to do an initial response to East Coast flooding. However, what I will always say is we cannot do this alone. And it's not just the support of our own partners within the Local Resilience Forum. We will absolutely always have to lean on national resilience. So my other fire service colleagues around the country, when we come to have these events, will have to come in and support us. But we have got very well trusted and tested exercising situations where we know that will happen very timely and very effectively. And then the only element which I'll just go back and it's just something for us to be focusing on into the future is about the funding streams to ensure that we are going to be future-proofed for the future. As we know, environmental impact will always have an element of flooding that will be evolving and changing, and we need to ensure that we're going to be best placed to be able to respond to that. So we'll always be working with our partners, linking in with DEFRA, but also within the county to ensure that we've got a financial model that's been able to support the residents, particularly on the east coast of the county. So I think that's an overview of the paper. So I think to give my voice a rest, if okay, Chair, I'd like to pause and open up for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. We've got 3 members wishing to speak. All the surnames begin with C. We've got Councillor Clark first, then Councillor Corey, and then Councillor Cook. So firstly, over to you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I remember following all this on the news about shall we extend the season or shan't we? Can you tell us when is the winter flood season? There's 3 questions. What input have the caravan owners had in all of this? And the old scenario you described, is it reliable on call on standby firefighters?
Okay,
thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So I'm trying to break that down in regards to where I think the first question is about where the winter season really goes from there. Clearly, that can be fairly fluid, but really, any time from November all the way through till March is predominantly where we know we're going to have more severe weather. Winds are higher, linking in that regards to when we're getting high tides, particularly coming from a northwesterly view is where we have the combination of highest risk. I'll always caveat that because we've had some significant floodings in June and July time as well. And that's why I indicated that we always need to be mindful of the environmental developments, that we need to ensure that we're agile enough to support that at any time. That's why I say the traditional winter season is still always the higher risk, but we're not closing our eyes to the fact that that can come in any month of the year, really, and we're always prepared for it. The second element in regards to our links in regards to East Lindsey District Council, that is primarily through our relationship through the Local Resilience Forum in regards to the risks that we're particularly involved in. On a local level, our divisional commander is linked into East Lindsey District Council to have discussions in regards to proposals and plans. And if the plans are involved anything that's got to do with planning restrictions and occupancy, then clearly we have a responsibility to give a formal response under our responsibilities under the regular reform order, etc. But more importantly, I think relating to this risk, it is our relationship through the Local Resilience Forum that we are utilising that. And then I think, Councillor, your final question in regards to the reliance on our on-call personnel. And if I'm honest, you've always given me an opportunity for me to appreciate and highlight the value of our on-call personnel, to be honest with you. I actually see the on-call personnel as being our greatest asset, particularly in regards to the the flooding type incidents, because actually when we are looking at wide scale protracted incidents, so incidents that are going to carry out for many days, it is our on-call personnel that we can pull together, we can rotate round, and we can move around quite more flexibly. But more importantly, their commitment to serve their local community is absolutely amazes me on a day-by-day basis. And I will always go back to the Waynflete flooding scenario. They were people that lived in the communities that wanted to respond to their community to support their own people. And they are absolutely 100% dedicated. They are available to receive all the training. They have all the PPE and equipment. And time again, they show their value in being able to respond to it. Our role and my role for the organisation, if I'm honest, normally focus around is their welfare and rotating them to make sure that they come away from the area, and then we can give them sufficient rest, recovery before they actually want to go back out there and keep serving their communities again. So it's a really poignant point that you've raised, Councillor, in regards to our reliance on our on-call, but they respond first class every time.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. So over to Councillor Corey, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to take part in your meeting. Good morning. In 2019, I attended the multi-agency training exercise that the Chief mentioned on the coast, and I was unsurprisingly very impressed with the level of equipment and capability and the range of situations that our firefighters train for, and the range of situations that our firefighters have to get people out of very quickly when you're talking about flooding and inundation. And what surprised me most was how resource intensive extrications from static caravans can be, or those who are receiving end-of-life care at home. But it's not just the training and equipment and capability that I was really impressed with during that training exercise. It's the sharing of information across the agencies accurately and quickly that fire and rescue have been central in developing. So I wanted to thank the Chief for that and to highlight that to our colleagues. And finally, I just want to reiterate the point that the Chief was making and what Kev picked up on. When I was watching the caravan extrications, the intensity of resources and how much time and how many fire tenders, how many fire appliances had to go to a single extrication, when all the other incidences we know are stacking up across the coast. So when East Lindsey are looking to develop their economic model, as a county council, we really need to understand what impact their economic model is going to have on our firefighters. Thank you for indulging me with that, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Corey. Mark, back to you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. I think, just like I say, I think Councillor Corey's raised some really important points there, and for me, not least in regards to the financial impact that development on the East Coast, and ensuring that whatever the outcomes or the impacts of that is, us as a fire and rescue service are going to be well placed to ensure that we can provide that operational response. So it is absolutely pivotal that we are linked in with East Lindsey in regards to these developments, particularly in regards to, as we're talking today, the caravan site, and also linking in with the environmental agency. So where we do have real sophisticated data in regards to flooding concepts and potential scenarios to understand how we can be best placed to respond to that. And I think that's always important for us to identify that and highlight that as a potential risk and how we can mitigate that. And I think it just emphasises a point that I did want it, and I've raised a couple of times, is that, and it will always be something that we need to be considered within the financial planning of the future to ensure that we have got the best resources to appropriately meet the needs, particularly on the East Coast there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Some of the questions I was going to ask have already been answered. Thank you so much for your report, Mark. Always good to hear from you. Really impressed with the work you're doing at the moment, and to hear how you're planning for the future. I was just wondering, it is also about the East Lindsey District Council decision to extend the caravan season. If flooding gets a lot worse along the East Coast, can Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue influence them to overturn their decision due to the increased pressure on your resources?
Okay, that's a very good question as well, Councillor Cook. Where we would consider ourselves as being a professional body that is able to give the advice and the information in regards to what would be the impact and likely scenarios of any changes on and increase in regards to resident location in particular area. We would do that in conjunction, in partnership with the Environmental Agency, and also just the Environmental Agency has, if I'll say, the most significant influence in regards to this particular question, because quite rightly they have the statutory responsibility and also the skills and the knowledge and data to actually give that advice and support in regards to flooding areas. Obviously, as you know, our statutory responsibilities at this moment in time doesn't specifically cover how us responding to floods. Again, if I'm honest with you, that phrase where people levy at me, I always kind of bat that off as quick as I possibly can, because people can talk to me all day about statutory responsibilities. I'm very clear that the role of Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue is to be here to support the people of Lincolnshire, and we'll do whatever we can to carry on doing that. And while we've got the skills and the personnel to do that, absolutely, that is our role. So in regards to the influence in there, our influence would stretch as far as giving a professional view of the impact of residents in regards to our experiences and knowledge of being in the flooding environment, and how we can mitigate that and how we can respond to that. But ultimately, I would, if I'm honest, be cautious about giving direct advice to East Lindsey District Council in the way, for example, saying they should or they should not expand. But the Local Resilience Forum as a collective voice are absolutely linked into there and giving some clear indications of what that impact may be.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you both. Can't see any others. Someone coming through now. Okay, so Nicole wishes to speak, so over to you, Nicole.
Thank you. It was just coming out in support of Mark actually there, and in response to a little bit more to Councillor Cook's query. Obviously, Lincolnshire County Council do have the lead local flood authority powers. So that involves discretionary and permissive powers with regards to what we can do and how we react and behave towards flooding situations and weather events. But also, obviously, under planning, we have a responsibility to make responses and help our district colleagues when they're making planning applications. We are in a position to be able to contribute to that as collectively as an organisation. So there are multiple different ways in that we can proceed with that would include fire and rescue's opinions as well. But it does go a little bit broader and wider when it comes to planning.
Okay, thank you, Nicole, for that clarity, because I was thinking if it wasn't fire and rescue's statutory responsibility, whose is it? So that answers that question. Mark, I've got one or two questions for you. do you get involved in preparedness? Clearly you respond to incidents, but do you get in preparedness at all? We see on TV about these flood barriers being erected close to rivers and whatever, and sandbags being put up and whatever. Could you just answer that one for me, please?
Absolutely. We get involved in that as much as every other agency. In regards to two areas I'd like to probably cover on that, Chair, if I may. In regards to roles and activities such as sandbags and putting control measures in place prior to a flooding, absolutely we get involved in that. That's coordinated through the Lincolnshire Resilience Forum, but also really the first port of call is directly with the district councils, and our emergency planning team and their duty emergency planning teams coordinate those discussions and activities, and if there's a requirement for us to provide resources to support activities such as sandbagging, then absolutely we are available for that. In regards to the other preparedness work such as the flood defences, etc., that does link into more with the environmental agency, and I think, Nicole, forgive me if I'm not straying too much into outside of my area of expertise, but within the local lead flood authority area links into that more than directly what fire would be in regards to that, because that's more long-term infrastructure support rather than the initial response phase.
Okay, thank you. I think I can see that Nicole wishes to come back on that one.
Hi, yeah, again, just to support what Mark said, really, in regards to the approach that we take to the flood defences. So when we know that there is going to be a significant weather event and we've got time to prepare, then as Mark suggests, there is a multi-agency response, a multi-organisational response, and we tend to have a collective responsibility. So fire and rescues obviously is when there is a risk for life, specifically they can go in with their equipment, but actually at a lower level when it's with regards to preparedness, our highway teams are fundamental in that, with the issuing of sandbags, etc., to make sure either roads can be kept passable or indeed when we have to make a decision to close roads, and as Mark's already identified, districts play a key role with that as well. In anticipation, as an example, for last week's floods, what we had was a collective responsibility where we had shared resources, that regardless of where the issue arose in the county, we had an agreement with our district colleagues that those resources, such as sandbags, would be shared. I would just kind of emphasise at this point in time, sandbags are not the answer to everything, and we would like to steer the conversation away from sandbags a little bit, particularly for householders' preparedness and taking some responsibility themselves, because I think they're seen as the answer, and I can see why, but maybe they're not all of that. And then just going a little bit wider with regards to the environment, again, Mark's absolutely correct. We have, as part of the lead local flood authority, we have a flood partnership across Lincolnshire, where the Environment Agency, the internal drainage boards, the water companies, the districts and the county council all participate in order to try and enhance our water courses and make sure that that water moves around the county as effectively and as efficiently as possible. So for Lincolnshire, it's not always just about flooding, and sometimes it's about drought as well. So that's a governance structure that's been in place since 2012 when the powers came to us, and that works incredibly effectively and efficiently now.
Okay, thank you for providing further clarity on that then, Nicole. Councillor Clark wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Nicole's just said that householders need to take some responsibility, which I can understand. What about when local authorities allow housing developments on floodplains? shouldn't the local authority be taking some responsibility? And, you know, in the future, thinking that if we build houses on the floodplains, there will be floods. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. As there's someone there who can answer that question or attempt to answer that question for Councillor Clark.
Councillor Pepper, I can probably come back, but obviously planning is a matter for districts.
Sure. Okay, that's answered that one. Short and brief and concise. Thank you. Okay, so Mark, if someone phones Fire and Rescue and says their house is flooded, what is the criteria for the Fire and Rescue to attend? Clearly, this can vary. Some people can have a few inches in the house to a few feet, and also it could be one single house on its own, and it could be a dozen or 100 houses or whatever. So what is the actual criteria for calling out Fire and Rescue?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. And as you indicated, the criteria and the scenario can vary so differently. And first and foremost, what I'll say is anybody who's getting water coming into the house is a very stressful and a difficult situation to be in. But also what we need to balance that is the fact that we do have limited resources in regards to Lincolnshire. So how we will mitigate that is if somebody dials 999 and comes into our control room, our control staff are trained and skilled into doing an assessment of the situation on the information that the caller would give our control operators. And they will assess that in regards to whether it's a life risk, whether there's actually water entering the property or whether it's near the property. And they also have an overview of what the situation is surrounding them as well. And that's taken from they have access to the EA information, Environmental Agency, and also the latest flooding predictions. And then finally, clearly, they would also have the intelligence picture of other 999 callers that would be coming in around the county. So they very quickly have an overview of what the flooding situation is around. If there is in any doubt that there is a risk to life or there is a potential that we can make that situation better, when we've got multiple incidents, to ensure that we use the best resources, we will most likely send an officer on their own to go to that premise, and they will do an assessment and liaise with the 999 caller, but also liaise with the other local residents just to get a real understanding of the developing picture. And they will make an assessment and call back to control to identify what resources will be required at that area to ensure that we can do the best we can. And that response will range from giving some specialist flooding support advice in regards to what the residents can do themselves to ensure that the situation doesn't get any worse, to reassurance and assurance that the information that we've got, whether that situation is going to get any worse or not, all the way through to absolutely requesting the resources required to move that water away from that area. So, and that's how we manage to mitigate the risk to everybody across the county with the resources we've got. So there's several triage elements of it to ensure that we've got the right resources getting to each area. But absolutely our highest priority, and if there's any doubt, if there is a life risk, we will send the resources straight away.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for that. Just a note there from Councillor Wotton saying he's got an emergency water leak and may be unavailable for a short while. So be prepared, Mark. It's been mentioned several times about the caravans being occupied during the winter months and flooding months, and so there's the potential there, I suppose, Mark, for as many caravans to be occupied during that time as what there's in the summer. Do we know roughly how many caravans there are and how many people that could affect?
Chair, we have got that information and data. I haven't got it to hand, to be honest with you, but we have got that information because through our local resilience forum and through my East divisional commander has that the data in regards to the amount of caravans. We have the occupancy figures in winter months and in summer months, so we can give a very clear, accurate prediction of what the resident figures and occupancy will be. And I know that information has been discussed in regards to East Lindsey District Council's initial plan to allow the extension of the caravan site. So, but I haven't got those figures to hand. I can supply them to you after the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Councillor Worth wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd just like to say, obviously, I'll come in 3/4 way through this conversation because I've been in another meeting, but just hope that you've, as a committee, got the confidence from this discussion that all the preparations are there in place for any potential inundation on the East Coast. I know it was an issue that the executive picked up as part of the IRMP process, and I've certainly got every confidence that in the unlikely event that we get something as bad as that we are ready and prepared. And I know that Mark and his team have done a huge amount of work on this, so I'd just like to thank them for that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Worth. Just one more from me. Just over a week ago, we heard a sad case on TV of a man and his dog seen on CCTV being swept out to sea on the south coast. Should that happen on our coast, say Skegness, during high tide and flooding, and you have a boat, say at Skegness Fire Station, would you get involved in that at all, or would that just purely be down to the RNLI and the Coast Guard?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. The responsibility, statutory responsibility, as soon as we start getting into the sea, into the coastal rivers, does fit with our RNLI, and they would be the response service. Our teams aren't trained to operate with it on the sea in regards to that, because there are higher and significant risks in regards to how you operate within that environment, and also the equipment and the type of boats that are required. We don't possess them. However, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't be going there in a support function. And there's times where when there's been reports of people being swept away in such tragic circumstances, and we've been mobilised to stand by to see if we can support either on the edge on the coast there, if there's anything that we can do, but primarily that would be our RNLI function.
Yes, as I suspected, Mark. I know just drifting off topic a little bit, but should there be a fire on a boat at sea, which is clearly visible from, say, Skegness, just wondered on how you'd deal with that.
So we have dedicated teams that are dotted around the country, which is called the Marine Incident Response Group, and they are dedicated teams that can be helicoptered onto vessels, and they have specialist training on how to deal with ship fires and boat fires. Now, we have the same level of dedicated teams within Lincolnshire, because we have the two ports within Lincolnshire. So the skills and the equipment that's required to deal with a fire within a vessel is similar that if they're standing in a port than if they're out in the sea. However, we haven't got the capability to transport dedicated teams out into the sea and operate in that environment. However, we have assets. Our closest assets are in Suffolk, and where they will be mobilised, there would be potentially an RAF helicopter that would pick them up, and they would literally lower them down on the boat, and they will then engage in the firefighting activities and assist with any evacuation activities in situ. So kind of a summary of that answer really is, Chair, is we haven't got the teams that go out into the environment in the sea. We have the same level of training and teams to deal with fires in vessels if they're in our port within our own jurisdiction. But if there was a type of event, then we got the confidence that national teams would be deployed, and they have done that on a handful of cases in the last 10 to 15 years, but it is a very rare event. I suppose the one thing I would add on that is the ships and the crews tend to be extremely well trained in regards to how to deal with the initial response of a fire on a vessel. So although fires in vessels may happen more regularly, they are more often not dealt with before the requirement of us having to step in.
Thank you, Mark, and apologies for drifting off the flooding, but thank you very much for that. We don't seem to have any further speakers. Can you just clarify that, Councillor Stokes?
Yeah, I can't see any more speakers, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So that's all the speakers. The report refers to a tabletop exercise, and indeed the Chief Fire Officer mentioned the date of that is on the 10th of February, and invitations are to be sent out. So just to bear that in mind. The actions for this committee is to consider Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue's response to East Coast inundation and seek assurance. I believe we've done that, so I'm personally going to propose that the committee receives the report and has been reassured by the work being undertaken by Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue to respond to any inundation event on the East Coast. Rather than going through all the names, I've proposed it. Does anyone dissent to that at all? If so, please speak up now. Okay, no one coming through, so that's all agreed. I can confirm all agreed. So thank you very much, Mark, and the members for all your input in that one. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move on then to item 5, which is the revenue and capital budget proposals 2021-2022. This item sets out the budget proposals for 2021-22 for the Council's Public Protection and Community Services. The report will be presented by Keith Norland, Head of Finance Communities. If you'd like to speak on this item, just a reminder again, please type speak into the chat. We will take questions at the end of the report. So over to you, Keith.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. As has already been said, this report presents the budget proposals for the next financial year. On pages 13 to 15 of the pack, I provided some of the context in terms of the 2020 spending review and the provisional local government settlement. I won't go through that in any detail, but as expected, the spending review was pretty much a rollover of existing arrangements rather than a more fundamental review, largely due to the coronavirus pandemic. We continue to see further delay in local government funding reforms. So again, the budget we're presenting is for a single year due to the uncertainty for future years. The Executive approved the budget proposals for consultation at their meeting on the 5th of January. That includes a proposed 1.99% increase in council tax. The proposed revenue budgets for public protection and communities are presented in Table A towards the bottom of page 15 of your pack. The table shows the movements in terms of the current year budget, pay inflation, cost pressures and savings. Given the expectation of public sector pay restraint, the 155,000 allowed for pay inflation is effectively just to put budgets back where they should be in terms of catching up with the higher than budgeted pay awards for the current year. No further pay inflation has been allowed for in 21-22. There are, however, a number of increases in the proposed budget to address out cost pressures. In the coroner's service, there's a pressure of 536,000, which relates to increases in the cost of contracted services. There's an increase in 585,000 of the budget requirement for community safety, which arises from increased statutory duties for domestic abuse service and the need to fund services that were previously funded from reserves. For fire and rescue, cost pressure of 391,000, which is mostly related to increased costs to preserve the resilience of the control function and a requirement to increase the level of emergency medical training. The £42,000 increase in cultural service is simply due to inflation in the library's contract. There are some projected savings, 206,000 expected from the increased income target for the registration service, and some grant income offsetting some of the increased duties in community safety. I think it's important to stress that during the current year, a number of services have been significantly impacted by the pandemic, and the resulting costs and losses of income have been funded by a government grant. These proposed budgets for 2021-22 are based on the assumption that any continuing impacts from COVID will similarly be fully grant funded. Moving on to capital budgets, Table B on page 17 sets out the proposed capital programme. Other than some rephasing of expenditure for existing projects, there are no changes to the previously approved programme or the services within this remit. Looking at the timescales for the rest of the budget process, consultation with local business representatives and trade unions will take place on the 28th of January. The proposals are now live on the council website with the opportunity for public to comment. The executive will make its final budget proposals on the 2nd of February, which will then be considered by full council on the 19th of February. Hopefully that summarises the main points of the paper, so I'll stop there for questions.
None coming through. Councillor Stokes, have we anyone wishing to speak?
Yeah, Councillor Clark.
Councillor Clark. Over to you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Keith. In plain terms, then, I'm getting confused because under the revenue budget in Table A, it's got a saving to registration of 108,000, but then you just mentioned it's got 200,000 somewhere else coming into it. So at the end of the day, you know, what is the figures for these sectors?
Right. Yeah, sorry if I confused it. In presenting the paper, I summarised the two items on the two lines there. There's the 108,000 for registration, which is increased income. The 98,000 relates to community safety, which is on the line below in the table, and is additional grant income. It's just that in sort of summarising my paper, I added those two together.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Diane wishes to speak. Diane Colson, please.
Hello, Councillor. Sorry, it is Sarah Barry. We're sharing a computer this morning.
Okay. Over to you then, Sarah. Yeah.
Just to explain the registration and coroners figures, the additional funding is required for coroners. Coroners over the last few years has traditionally had to rely on sort of bids for underspend, etc. But we've done a lot of work in this year to try and identify the actual cost of coroners. But that has included some uplift in the contracted costs. So that's the additional funding required. But it is offset a little bit by 100,000 extra income that registration believe they will be able to earn in the forthcoming year due to the move across from a lot of the weddings that have been cancelled this year.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. No one else coming through. Keith, Table B, which is the capital budget. I hear there's a replacement fire station at Curtin on the horizon. Perhaps Executive Councillor Worth might be in a better position, but is that included in the figures, or is that for a later date or whatever? Do you know that, please?
That's certainly not included in those figures presented in Table B. I'm not aware of it anywhere else in the capital programme either. I mean, it would normally go through the corporate property part of the capital programme in terms of bricks and mortar, but I'm not aware of it currently been in the programme.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned that 1.23 further consultation in fact in 2 days' time with business representatives, trade unions, etc. So are the figures we see today subject to change prior to them going to the executive?
They're unlikely to change before they go to the executive. The executive will review all the comments received from scrutiny committees, from the public and from that consultation event, and that will inform their decision in terms of presenting their final proposals to council.
So it will still be the same figures as we see today?
The figures that you see today will be the ones going forward to the executive on the 2nd,
okay.
But they will have all of the comments from the various committees.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. I can't see anyone else wishing to speak. Councillor Stokes, can you just confirm that there's no one else?
There's no one else in the chat box, Chairman.
Seems though you got off quite light there, Keith, compared to the Chief Fire Officer. So, okay. The actions of this committee is to consider the report, to make comments on the budget proposals. These will be considered by the executive at its meeting on the 2nd of February. Again, I propose that the committee supports the budget proposals for the Council's Public Protection and Community Services, and that our comments are passed on to the executive, who they might be. Does anyone dissent to that at all? Because again, we'll do the same as before. If no one dissents. We've got one dissenter, that's Councillor Clark. I'll just wait a second or two to see if there's any others. No, none of those coming through. Nick, has that been noted? We've got it's been agreed, but one dissent.
Yeah, do you want to just for the record do a roll call? Now there's one dissent.
Well. Exactly. Yeah, good.
Okay then.
Good reminder there. So yeah, over to you then, Nick, for that.
Okay, Councillor Aaron, for or against?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, you've indicated
Against.
You're against, yeah. Councillor Cook is not present for this item. Councillor Ashley Morris is not in attendance. Apologies from Councillor Lawton. Councillor Oxby?
For.
Councillor Pepper?
For.
Councillor Stokes?
For.
Councillor Turner's not in attendance. Councillor Mrs. Linda Wotton's not in attendance. Councillor Ray Wotton?
For.
Thank you. That's carried, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. That's all agreed. Thank you very much for that. Now move on to item 7, which is the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of its work programme for the coming year to ensure that scrutiny activity is focused where it can be of greatest benefit. The report will be presented by Nigel West, Head of Democratic Services and Statutory Scrutiny Officer. So over to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite a short report because we are approaching that pre-election period. If you look at your next agenda items, proposed agenda items on the 16th of March, you'll see that we've got the performance reporting, performance framework for Q3 reporting on the agenda, and the prevent delivery plan. Those are the only 2 items at the moment, Chairman, unless councillors feel that they should have anything else on there. But obviously that's 6 days before the pre-election period begins. So it may be that there's no need for anything further, but I'll leave that to members. That's my report, Chairman. I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. There's no members coming through with anything, but can I suggest if members do think of anything in the next week or two to contact Nigel and let him know. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
The actions, very briefly, the actions for this committee is to review the work programme as set out in this report and highlight for discussion any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. So we've done that, albeit briefly. So can I ask that the work programme is approved similar to the last two items. If anyone dissents, could they please type it in the chat bar, please? None coming through, so I'm going to announce that's all agreed. That now brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you to all the officers for the presentations and to members for their attendance and input. You may now leave the meeting by using the red phone icon on the taskbar